So the next thing we're going to look at on a daily basis is alerting. Now you can monitor all kinds of stuff. We've got a great open API. I'm not going to get too much into that now because I'm going to cover it in more detail in a few minutes here. But just to stay kind of high level on what we do, and then we'll go into some of the more specific details about how we do those things. So you can obviously monitor in the UI, the desktop app. You can monitor an AGM, much better solution, monitor all of your clusters from one point. You can also send event notifications by email. Now, this isn't any sort of weird trap relay. You don't have to set up any sort of crazy infrastructure. All this does is say if there's an alert, email these people. So if you have a failed job, if you want to receive an email if you fail a job, we can do that. If every time you run a GC or a sweep, maybe you are the storage admin and you don't really care about what's on the disk, you just care about how much is on the disk. You can have an email set up, so every time your GC and sweep runs, that event triggers an email to your storage admins. So they can say, okay, well, we're as unconsumed as we're gonna be. We just finished a sweep. This is as good as it gets until next month. Let's see what we've got. And then we can start leveraging some of that storage tracking, the trend lines. You always, as a kind of a side note, you always want to look at that trend after a sweep. If you try to do, or if you look at Report Manager trying to do the math in the middle of a sweep, you're not going to get a real accurate number. You'll find about a 20-25% variance if we're doing the math in the middle of a GC or a sweep. Once that GC or sweep has stopped, that 20-25% variance comes down to, it's single digits. It's about 3 to 5%. And what do I mean by that? So what I was talking about, when you look at where the trend line intersects the capacity line, to know pretty well right down to kind of the week, second week of December, we're going to run out of disk. If you look at that line while GC is running, that number could be about 25% off. So not that big of a deal. Maybe, you know, we're talking about less than a week worth of difference here. And so when we're talking about keeping a production data service environment online, we're not buying our hard drives a week before. We're buying them 90 days before. So even that little bit of variance, it's not really going to impact the way that you use the Actifio, the way you plan for it. But if you did look at it during a GC and then you looked at it the next day when the GC was over and you saw two different numbers, I wanted to explain to you why that is. So back to alerting. Sorry, I went down the rabbit hole a little bit there. The last thing we can do is proper event notifications. They're the kind that people are generally more used to. Now, these are our traditional SNMP traps. For this, we're going to want a relay. We're going to want a trap receiver. We could also take something like a SolarWinds, a Fixomatic, Ansible, Jenkins, really anything that'll listen to an API call or a trap, we can stick on the other end of that. Now, for the purposes of this webinar, we're just going to stick with monitoring tools that will tell us about what went on. I do, however, want to mention to you that things like ServiceNow that have automation built in, if you know that sometimes maybe you're always on SQL, we'll say a DAG environment, and sometimes you're switching IPs, and you know if that job fails, it's probably because we're using the wrong IP, because we know that we're switching them and we've not necessarily discovered under both IP addresses. If you're using something like ServiceNow, you can actually use our API to fix the job parameters. That means replace the IP address with the one that you have it at now after the flip and automatically rerun that job. That's a whole nother webinar, and that'll be a great one. I hope you sign up for it. But yeah, you can, in addition to all of this monitoring that we can do with all of these third-party applications, we can actually also bring in some automation, which again is fascinating, but unfortunately a bit beyond the scope of this particular webinar. And so to do a little more of a deep dive here, now here is the UI. And I'm showing you this just to kind of reinforce that unification of reporting. The messaging is always going to be the same. So the email traps that you get, I'm sorry, not traps, the emails that you get are going to use the same verbiage that the UI uses. The alerts that are collected by, pardon me, your third-party applications, your SolarWinds, your ServiceNow, those are also going to see the exact same error codes. So the verbiage right down to the letter is going to be the same no matter where you see it, whether you see it in Report Manager under that daily violation summary, whether you see it in our UI, whether it's a direct email, or whether it is a trap that's issued, we're going to use the same wording in all 4 places. And again, use that wording, copy and paste it right into our federated search. And about 95% of the time, you're going to get a document, or you're going to get a KB, or a video, or maybe all 3, which are going to give you some more information on what that problem is and how to fix it. Now, some of the more interesting things, we'll start at the top here. Again, this is the same events that you're going to see in the UI will be sent via the SNMP traps or alert emails. And you can configure the severity. So maybe you've just got a warning. Maybe you've got a long-running job, or maybe your data set for that application has outgrown the staging disk. We need to resize the staging disk. And as some of us already know, if we resize the staging disk, we're no longer running an incremental. We need to run one full into that new staging disk. Now, maybe you don't care about that. Maybe everybody on your team doesn't care about that long-running job, but maybe one person does. You can actually set this alerting by granularity by either alert, by warning, or just by event. Not even a bad thing. It's just an event. Something happened. Tell me every time something happens. We can set the granularity per recipient. So we could maybe have a team lead who just gets kind of an overall environmental summary. And maybe we've got our sysadmins that are in charge of our different sites. They're getting SLA violation reports. We've got our actual storage admins, our actual SAN engineers, and they're getting all the capacity. Maybe they want every single event, which may be useful. If a path goes offline, if it's because of multipathing, that's an adherence to an established rule. So that's not going to be an alert because things are doing what they were asked to do. A path came under contention. We found another path to the disk. That's going to be an event. If you're a storage admin, maybe you want to know that. Maybe you see that one link is always under contention. And so we don't really have multipath. We have 2 paths, but one's always busy. So we really are only getting use of one path. If I'm a storage admin, I want to know that. And you can make that information available to that person in the storage admin role without sending it to the whole world. So you can really just dial it in by kind of your high level accounting, your team based, this team is in charge of physical disks, so they're going to get the storage stuff. This team over here is in charge of data protection, so they're going to get all the SLA violation reports. And really, it's so configurable. However your organization is set up, and however these people watch this, those people watch that, these other people watch this third thing. You can really just break it down however you want and just deliver exactly what that team needs to them without giving them any more or any less, but then maintaining that availability to the full set of information in case some more thorough investigation needs to be done. Now, one of the first place you want to look when you come in the morning for, we'll just say ugly stuff, bad stuff, a disk going online, a node failing over, that's going to be your trap receiver. So you'll get a failed job. Hey, I couldn't run this job because the node had failed over. Well, of course you couldn't run it. You can't run a job on a failed over node. But you might not really want to look through your failed jobs report to know that you had a failover. That should be something that's really right in your face. That should be the first thing you see. You shouldn't have to go looking for it. So if we look at our receiver, all of these remember I said we could set granularity? We can set a single receiver that only looks at severe, only shows me RAID sets that have degraded, disks that have reported that they are not in good health, paths going down, network timeouts that were unrecoverable. We can very easily set this alerting mechanism to just send all of those type of really mission critical errors to a single repository that we can check every day. And then maybe the events we were talking about, multipath was enacted because this path came under contention. We can still run that, but let's send that to a different receiver. We don't want that to muddy the waters. We definitely want a single point where we can see hardware failures. We can see the network go down. We can see anything that's going to cause some sort of mission critical issue to our data protection or data service environment. Now, if you need more information on Actifio alerting, here's everything we've got here. We've got a great documentation video, which is actually going to show you how to get through the docs. We do have all of our events and alerting covered in a single document. However, I find that that's very well supplemented by our CLI doc. So I wanted to give you the link to the actual documentation video. It's a video called Docs Served 3 Ways. There's 3 different places every Actifio user can get access to our documents. And this details all 3. And it covers different use cases. If you're at your desk and you're just doing some research, we can just go online. We can go to docs.actifio.com. We can peruse to our heart's content and consume all day. If we have a data center that is, we'll say a dark site, we're not allowed to run the internet in there. As a matter of fact, we can't even have our laptops. We could download that PDF to a safe tablet. We could download it to a safe phone. We could download it to one of the data center's laptops that is permitted in the data center. Now, these can all be found again at docs.actifio.com. They can be found in your portal account at now.actifio.com. And we've also got a third video that shows you just kind of different ways you can download them, export them, send them around, make them available while you're offline. And we've also got a great document on configuring Actifio event alerting. Now, this is going to be all the critical information that your automation teams are going to need. So if you've got a group of real savvy Python coders and they're running your ServiceNow environment, all of the different event IDs that your automation teams are going to need is going to be in the configuring Actifio event alerting document. Now, if you don't have this great infrastructure, you don't have this brilliant team of Python coders who are doing all this automation and monitoring in the background, you can still get all of this information sent to you. It doesn't have to be through a trap relay. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you can just have these events emailed to you, and you can set the granularity. So if you have a switch that goes down in the middle of the night and one of our appliances can't talk to anything, you could just set it to email me when critical or severe events happen. And then you'll just get an email alert that that's gone on. And this is a great stopgap during implementation. Well, maybe you don't have your relay set up yet. And as we're kind of stitching the Actifio through an environment, generally there are virtualization teams that we need to talk to, network teams, storage teams, and sometimes it takes a little bit to get everybody orchestrated. So if you need to get that level of reporting in place before all the internal infrastructure is in place, we can just use the very kind of basic mail me if something critical happens, while we're then going in and getting our trap receivers set up. And again, there's more information on this on our YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us for another YouTube Tech Tip video. If you like the content you're seeing on this channel, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you will be alerted to any future content.